Good morning, everyone. It is my great pleasure to introduce you to my friend, Dr. Amy Narishkin. I met Amy out networking. Well, we'll just talk about that in a little bit. How about that? Let's just tell people kind of the nuts and bolts of who you are. Amy has got a PhD in adult education, and she is a thought leader, a strategist, and a consultant helping organizations make the shift to cultural intelligence, which you're going to learn a lot about today. Dr. Amy works with CEOs, management teams, and those who take lead in organizations to effectively implement the tools for CI, collaboration, and innovation for growth. Dr. Amy is also a certified administrator for the Intercultural Development Inventory. You'll learn about that too, I'm pretty sure. As a cross-cultural talk leader and successful entrepreneur, she coaches both individuals and organizational teams, creating exciting, culturally intelligent places to work and interact. So we will give you the information at the end of the podcast and in the comments about how to connect with Dr. Amy, but let's get to it. So I am so really honored and thrilled that we get to share our relationship and friendship, and most importantly, your expertise this morning. And I think probably we get to start off with, first of all, defining cultural intelligence. That's probably where it's best to begin.
Probably, since you've mentioned it probably 3 or 4 times, let's get that defined. And thank you, Derlene. Thank you for having me. And it is fun to be with a friend on a podcast, a friend and a colleague with a big old heart. So thank you. Thank you. Cultural intelligence, Derlene, is what you have. It's quite simply the ability to talk and work with just about anyone. And particularly important for me is that able to work and talk with just about anyone that you perceive as different. I should probably add that. And different can be because of generation or gender or race or orientation. However, an organization wants to be more inclusive and create a sense of belonging, the skill set is the same, which is beautiful. And one of the things that I've discovered, Derlene, in my work is that cultural intelligence really has 5 elements. And I've bumped into these 5 elements both in research and in practice, in talking with people and learning with people and teaching and coaching people. Can I share the 5 elements with you? Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
So the first element, which you know so well because you have a podcast, is curiosity, right? You have to have kind of a growth mindset and a desire to get to know people that are different, people who have a different perspective, different background. We all have curiosity, or most of us do. Mm-hmm. The thing is, though, when you're part of the dominant culture in any organization, and it's a particular characteristic in the United States, we're known for coming in hot with questions because we're just curious, right? And it seems like the best of intentions. However, when you come in hot with your questions and pepper somebody with your queries, it can feel intrusive. And that's partly because of our history. If you think about it, when white people were asking Black people historically, peppering them with questions, they might lose their children. If a white person is asking a brown person questions, they might get deported. Mm-hmm. So when we're talking with somebody that's new to us, we might be sensitive to maybe that person isn't nervous, but they could be. And so we want to slow it down. So the second word is contemplation. And we need to slow down, take a breath, and kind of check our motive. Are we just interested in learning about this person because they're an object of curiosity, or do we really want a relationship? So when we slow it down with contemplation and take a moment, we're going to find some courage to check our motivation and see if we have the bandwidth in that moment to actually lean in to having a conversation where we might learn something. It takes courage to learn. And also it takes courage because you don't know where the conversation is going to go. And it's in that conversation that you're going to learn their context. what's meaningful for them. You'll learn about them, but they're also if it's a safe space, they'll might share something about them, about themselves, and what that does is often break your heart open for compassion, which is the last word, is compassion for the other person within their context. So those are my 5 elements that I bumped into.
Okay, so go over them again. Curiosity, contemplation,
Curiosity, contemplation, courage, context, and compassion.
context. That's the one I missed. I
Well,
have, I
and
have notes.
that's Derlene, you actually may have missed it because that's actually the differentiator between perhaps emotional intelligence and cultural intelligence. Emotional intelligence is feeling with someone, and we definitely want to feel with a person who's different from us. However, compassion, kindness can be not appreciated if we don't know their context and what's meaningful for them. So, for example, if you're talking with an introvert or someone who's neuroatypical, and I don't mind if somebody gives me a compliment in public, but not all introverts want to be publicly recognized. And if you don't know that about them and their context, you could actually alienate them in a meeting where you have the best of intentions. So that's why that's kind of key to cultural intelligence. It shifts from me and my best of intentions to us and what do we both need.
I think that's, Amy, that is so true. You just sort of gave me a little aha moment here in terms of context. And then, just going inward and thinking about what you just said about complimenting somebody. And for someone to compliment me, I must have a lot of relationship behind that. Otherwise, I feel like it's out of context. I feel like maybe it's inauthentic.
Yeah, because they don't know you. Right.
Exactly. And on the flip side of that, I look to see the best in somebody and point that out to them.
Yes.
Right. So,
yes.
So I get to now think about context and really contemplate that. Yeah. I certainly have the curiosity. I certainly have the courage.
Yes, you do. And you always are thoughtful, contemplative about what you're saying. Yeah, that is key. The context and finding out what's meaningful for them. One of the things that I've discovered, to your point, is if you're going to praise or recognize somebody, you want to do it in a way that's meaningful for them, not for you.
Exactly.
And even more importantly, it's more meaningful if it's specific.
Yes, 100%.
If it's what I'm a teacher by training, go back 35 years of teaching. What we call it in my world is behavior specific praise. And that's really allows the person to feel seen. Like, for example, I really appreciate how when I'm talking, you're looking at me and you're smiling and you're just so fully present with me. And that's specific praise. And there's potential then for Derlene to feel seen and valued when you name the behavior or the action that's meaningful to you.
I so agree with you. One of the things that I was reading about that you wrote when you talk about what is cultural intelligence, the 2 words that really struck me was perspective and background, because I think that is the difference that makes the difference. When we recognize that we can only see this way based on, our perspective is our perspective based on our history, our experience, our wisdom, all the things. Yeah. And I personally think what the most exciting thing in this whole thing is that somebody is walking through a different door with their history, their perspective, their wisdom, and I get to learn about that or know about that or be in relationship with that, however you say that. And I just think that is just so beautiful. I think it's the difference that makes the difference.
This is what makes you such an extraordinary facilitator, is the fact that you have that big heart and that curiosity, and yet you manage to slow it down all the time and be so present It's awesome. It's what you do.
Well, thank you. And you know how much I love that, because I believe that this is a great opportunity to introduce cultural intelligence to the people who listen, who are in my sphere, right? Who are
Yeah.
super curious. And there is absolutely, with 100% certainty, that the right person's going to hear this. And thereby they then get to be part of our change of the world, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Can I share a tool that I teach in my first workshop?
Girlfriend,
That
you can share whatever you want.
Okay, because what you're making me think is somebody might be wondering, well, how do I do this? And we've talked about these kind of 5 steps, but there's a little bit more. One particular tool that's unique to cultural intelligence is being aware that your intention can be quite different than your impact.
Yes.
Because our intention to build a bridge and be in relationship with someone might be spot on, and please keep on having that great intention. However, like I said before, depending on the person you're talking to, the impact can be maybe not what you think it is. And so what do you do about that? How do you know? Is you check your impact. And it's the number one tool for cultural intelligence. Is you might say something like, can I ask you a question? And can you just tell me how that landed on you, or what was the impact of my words?
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and you don't want to plant a seed by saying something like, did I offend you? Because we don't need to plant a seed for negativity.
Well,
Just
already I can feel my brain going through the filing system of, what did I say? What did I say? What did I say that could have offended her? As soon as you said that, that's where, my filing system went to. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, it totally works on your spouse. It works on your teenagers. So often now, ever since I started this work and I learned that really vital tool, I'll say to Cyril probably several times a day, wait, how did that land on you? Or what did you hear? Or what was the impact of my words? Kind of whatever is your MO, you figure out your words. And more often than not, I'll say, okay, how did that land on you? And most of the time, Cyril's my husband, Cyril will say, oh, it's fine. And other times, yeah, not so much. And I'll just say, can I have a do-over? And you're like, yeah, I'd love that.
That's so cool, because we know, all of this work that both you and I do is all wrapped around, it's the life wheel, right? How we are in relationship with the world at large is how we're in relationship with our family, how we're in relationship with our finances, how we're in relationship with our health. Fill in the blank, right?
So
and
true.
and that's one of the reasons why I love what we do, is because we know when people come to us in a professional environment, which is what you work in, which I will ask you to share in a minute, and what they learn there, they get to leave at 5 p.m. and go home and use that skill set, that language, that whatever, fill in the blank, right into their home.
Right, right. That's actually one of the ways that I know that when I'm working in an organization, that it's actually being internalized, is because I'll have somebody lean and say, this totally works with my wife. And I'm like, yes, you figured it out. You figured it out. If we can open up that relationship with more authenticity, more tenderness, more appreciation for their day, their experience, their background. Oh my gosh, we've won. We've done the work.
Yep. And therein lies the transformation of the world. Just one little bitty thing like that equals a huge amount of shift, energy, whatever we want to call it. And I just think that is so cool.
I appreciate the fact that you just said transformation. It resonates with me because a friend of mine, it was within this past year, she said to me when I was describing how I was teaching, and she goes, Amy, you're not teaching cultural intelligence. And I said, what? And she goes, you're teaching transformation. And it brought me up short. And it's like, oh, yeah. Within one workshop, I do see light bulbs going on. I do see people making a shift in their mind. And when I put them into small groups, and they come up with concrete ways that they can stop minimizing other people and really make sure that they feel valued and seen before they walk away, it's transformative. And so thank you. I'm growing up that way. That's an area that I'm growing up.
Right. Yes. I used to, when I got into this neurolinguistics programming, I used to, like, our motto in our training room is transform the world. And I used to be, what would be the word? Intimidated by the actual me, be a part of the transformation of the world. And when you look out, well, personally, internalizing the training and then watching it happen right before my eyes in training, just seeing those aha moments and just those, if I was not in that world, my life would be so different. I ran into a guy last night. I don't know, he's probably about 75 years old, came to our training, and he was just walked up to me and he goes, and I need you to know that I still, after all these years, after that training, I no longer procrastinate. He goes, I'm in go-go mode. And just with a little childish little boy grin.
That's so cute. That's so cool.
Yeah, it was really
go
neat.
Derlene, go. That's awesome.
So tell me, because I think it's really interesting. First of all, your background is in education, which was the intersection of our first conversation. She's my people, she's my people.
We're teachers.
And then, so is this something that you were always interested in, and then you took it to the next level, or how did all of this focus on cultural intelligence come about for you?
Oh, you're right. It is grounded in teaching, because as a public school teacher, you're required to meet at every kid where they are and make sure that they are successful to the best of their ability. And that includes them and their background and their experience and their thought processes and their abilities and so-called disabilities. So just loving children and making sure that they're successful, you're right, it does ground my work. And then when I started training teachers to do that, making sure they had those same lenses on to make sure every child in your classroom finds success in a way that's meaningful for them was probably the grounding of this work. But more specifically, when Michael Brown was killed here in St. Louis, that's what launched me into this work, because Cyril and I were I'm married to a foreign-born national. All of Cyril's family's in France. And in 2014, August, we were doing a bike ride from Paris to Normandy to celebrate the 75th anniversary of D-Day. And I know D-Day's in June, but that's when we could get the 25 French cousins and us all in the same place at the same time was in August, which is their holiday month in France. His grandfather had been part of the French resistance and was assigned an American battalion to meet and greet and translate for and fight alongside back to Paris. And because the Nazis had confiscated all cars, he and his two oldest daughters rode for the coast, and we redid that bike ride.
My God.
It was a striking contrast, celebrating freeing an occupation, people who had been occupied. Sometimes we would run into people who were still so grateful that Americans had helped free their country. We came back, and it was August 12th or 13th. The kids had to be back in school. So I think it was around about that time, a friend called and said, you know what's going on in Ferguson? And I said, no, I'm jet lagged getting the kids back into school. And so I started kind of bringing myself up to speed. Really, the protesting had been going on since August 8th. And I wasn't hearing about it, which was really strange to me. Dug into it by Saturday morning. Now the protesting had been going on for more than a week. I asked the kids, how are you talking about this in school? And what was really striking, Derlene, as a teacher, this is a teachable moment. right?
Yes.
Why not take the opportunity to dig into why people are protesting, why people are so frustrated? And I'm thinking about how Parker, the pacifist Parker Palmer, said violence only happens when people don't know what to do with their pain.
Ooh, say that again
Right?
for us.
Violence only happens when people don't know what to do with their pain. And so it just struck me, who's not listening?
Mm.
Kids don't act out for no reason. Teenagers don't rebel for no reason. Grown-ups aren't grumpy for no reason. Somebody's not listening, or somebody hasn't slowed down and taken a moment to be present and begin to figure out what's meaningful for this person and what compassionate act can we take, right? That's all cultural intelligence, but I didn't know that yet. I just knew somebody wasn't listening. But what was striking to me is that my kids didn't know about it. And what I came to understand was that there's a gag order over all the schools in the Metro St. Louis area, which after I got over my anger, I began to realize, oh, people don't know how to talk about it. No
Mm.
wonder there's protesting. And I called a friend of mine who I'd done the doctoral program at UMSL with, which is the University of Missouri St. Louis. I'm using an acronym. He and I spent several years together in the adult education program. And he's a Black man with a all Black church in North City, St. Louis, in a tough part of town. And I called him and I said, what's going on? I'm not from St. Louis. Why isn't anybody talking about it? And he said, honestly, Amy, my white friends don't want to talk with me either. And I like, and he goes, unless of course I'm speaking from the heart of a pastor, they don't want to. And I said, well, what about within your community? And he said, well, of course we're talking about it, but we're so accustomed to tragedy.
Mm.
I was like, wow. And I was trying to figure out the disconnect, the silent, the deafening silence, and then the not indifference, just heartbreaking kind of helplessness sort of thing. He and I now, because we're talking about race, we're both educators, we're both parents, we both have spirituality that's important to us, but because our races are so different, now our conversation's going to a whole new level, and we realized that we could bring these conversations about race into his church, and we started holding cross-cultural conversations in his church. It was actually during those conversations that I began to notice, oh, people are actually both Black and white, men and women, don't really have a skill set, particularly my fellow whites, just didn't know how to talk with people about differences. A curriculum came into being during that time. I was growing and learning and writing and growing and learning and writing, all in there together.
I love that. In terms of, I love that you touched on the how, because I think that and that's across the board all the way in any opportunity that we have, or in any situation where there's a difference, right? There's a man who's in my Toastmasters group, and he has it's a neuro something disease. I haven't quite pinned exactly what it is, but anyway, he has tumors that form thousands upon thousands upon thousands of tumors that form all over his body. And at first glance, in transparency, you kind of go, oh, well, one of his talks at Toastmasters was about his journey of standing up there talking about it, and this was what was so interesting. So upon my first, and I'm just being completely honest, right? My first time I saw him, I was taken back.
I bet.
And when he got up there and he started talking, this can make me cry. When he got up there and he started talking, I didn't even see him physically anymore. I had tapped into the soul of who he was.
Yeah.
And so he started talking about his experiences of going into a pool and everybody running out of a pool, and, just being a stepfather to, just all kinds of stuff. And I had to like totally refocus back in that, oh yeah, he's got a physical,
Challenge, problem. Yeah, that
yes,
scared people. That scared
yes.
people.
And I just thought it was like, I was like, sort of like, I kind of went, wake up, Derlene. He's talking about what he physically looks like. And,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
was just so enlightened by his courage,
Mm.
his, commitment to telling his story so that other people can learn.
Mm-hmm.
And, me, I'm a big, huge story person. And I will always remember that about and this was very recently, this was just within the last 2 months. And it has literally changed who I am because
Yeah.
now I know how to talk about that with him because I know where he's coming from
Mm.
out of complete curiosity in terms of how is it that I can help you, right?
Mm.
Um, to whatever it is that you need, you know. And I look really, really forward to continuing that relationship with him because it's game changer. It's a world changer.
Mm. What's
And
what's extraordinary is that that you had your curiosity and are naming that you felt repelled, repulsion. I guess is the better word.
I think that's a fair statement.
And then you slowed it down, and do you see, you found your courage to learn more about him and his context. And actually the thing that the differentiator, once acknowledged, began to be less important, and his humanity showed up because you, Darlene, leaned into the relationship. And the gentleman who wrote the Just Mercy, the book, and Netflix made a movie about him, Brian Stevenson, uh, an advocate and a lawyer, and argued before and won before Supreme Court to make sure that children under age 18 couldn't be condemned for life, put in prison.
Uh-huh.
Uh, Brian Steven talks about the antidote to this divisiveness in society is proximity, moving in and being present with someone and getting to know their soul. And the differences are vital to know and to acknowledge. And there's more to the story. Their humanity shows up in all its authenticity. One of the things that's really important about cultural intelligence is we recognize and notice and sometimes name the differences and the commonalities. We don't just kind of focus on the commonalities, because that minimizing our differences can make somebody feel sidelined or silenced or invisible. Him and the disease that he has is part of how he identifies. And to ignore that would not be cultural intelligence. Compassion for it and seeing it, and then digging deeper, because he's more than just his
Oh
disease.
my gosh.
He's
Like
more than his disease.
99.9% more.
It, and we can't. So people will say, Amy, you just talk about race, and I'm like when I called my friend Kim St. Clair, right? When Tyree Nichols was killed by the 5 police officers. And I just called to ask how it landed on her. And we talked about race for a couple of minutes. She's an African-American woman, right? And obviously I'm white.
Obviously.
Obviously. Well, if you can see me, I don't know if somebody's just listening to the
No,
podcast.
that's fair.
So we talked about race for a couple of minutes. But then we got into deeper stuff about what's happening in society and the polarization and how we don't want our kids participating in this divisiveness. And so once we named our differences, the conversation evolves into something, just like you notice, way deeper than the physical differences. It's so cool.
Yep, I so totally agree with you. So share briefly, like, what specifically that you do, who you actually target for your business in terms of building your business, and the name of your business. I didn't even mention Empowering Partners. Empowering Partners, you all. And so just share a little bit about that with us so that the listeners know and perhaps can attach us to other people that you get to help.
Oh, thank you. So often, kind of, where do I start? when an organization either wants to diversify because it's the right thing to do, or wants to reach a broader market because they need to grow their business, often that's the impetus for hiring me. So or sometimes it's when they have fighting in groups. One CEO reached out because they were struggling. They have clients in Southeast Asia and in South America, but engineering couldn't talk to marketing and sales. Right? Can you help me out with that? Yeah, absolutely, I can. Because the skill set doesn't change. Learning how to listen and hear someone out and appreciate another's context allows you to adjust your behavior, be more compassionate. And so they needed to grow their cultural intelligence inside the organization so that they could be more effective outside their organization. Awesome. We start with the intercultural development inventory. When an organization wants to diversify, my opinion of whether or not they're going to be able to do it or how well they're doing adds up to like nothing. My opinion doesn't add up to anything. So we just start with some empirical data. The IDI is a 20-minute online assessment tool, and it lets you know what stage of cultural intelligence you're in, which is really cool because then I can customize my training to exactly where you are. You'll go ahead.
That's just perfect. Meet them where they are. Take them where they want to go.
Yeah, now you're talking like a teacher. I love it. So you'll recognize the stages of cultural intelligence. There's 5 of them. There's denial, somebody who just misses differences completely. They may have grown up in a working class community and never been exposed to differences. Sometimes denial is intentional. More often than it's not. They just aren't aware. They haven't been exposed to differences. The next stage of cultural intelligence is polarization. You know those people. They point out differences and they can be polarizing, right? They definitely see differences and they're judgmental of them. The next stage is minimization. So we go from denial to polarization to minimization, where we definitely see differences, but we're less judgmental. But we downplay differences to keep peace. And it can kind of hurt people. Minimization might sound like to a child who just fell down, oh, get up, you're fine. Mm-hmm. It can sound like if a man says to a woman, that's not sexism, is it? That's minimization, right? Oh, I don't see color. That's minimization. Anytime you downplay somebody's uniqueness, it's with the best of intentions, but the impact is not good.
Yeah.
What we're headed toward is the last 2 stages, acceptance and adaptation. Acceptance, like minimization, sees differences, but tends to withhold their judgment. They're still judgmental. We're all judgmental. And to your point earlier, Derlene, we all have our preferences and biases, how we were raised. Mm-hmm. But the ability to hold them just a little more lightly in order to lean in and get more information, like you did with that gentleman in Toastmasters, you got more information. And then once you accepted him and all his differences, his uniqueness, those tumors, and then learned about his soul and his heart, you could adapt your behavior to show the respect you feel. And that's cultural intelligence. And that's what organizations learn how to do. We think in society we're in polarization, but actually most of us, 66.8% of the population around the world is in minimization.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's our default. I actually had somebody say to me, I don't understand why, white supremacy is just got a stranglehold on our culture. Why isn't it easing? It has a lot to do with the fact that there's this cultural blindness or minimization going on. And like I said a minute ago, it's with the best of intentions that we don't see one another because we want to keep peace, but we need to. Yep. We need to, if we want more innovation, collaboration, engagement, profit in our organizations, we actually have to acknowledge and see those that uniqueness and those interesting stories. Mm-hmm. That's when people are going to bring their whole selves to work, and it's going to be more authentic, and collaboration and innovation skyrocket when people can be themselves. Mm.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Overall life and business happy work life harmony,
yeah,
happiness. All the
yeah.
right. So I
That's
want to
actually where
switch.
the transformation takes place, is when people shift out of minimization into allowing people to be where they are and allowing themselves to be where they
Yeah,
are.
100%. 100%. So I want to switch over, if with your permission, to just, I really would love to, you and I both became entrepreneurs. Let's just say past I was 52. I don't know how old you were. And just
I think about, I'm 57 now. I probably started this work when I was about 49 or 50, kind of in depth. Yeah, yeah.
so I
Second
want
half of life work, right?
oh yeah, oh my gosh. Well, just a little side note. Yesterday I did a Facebook Live on um responding to something that I had seen in the news about a young man who called women are only in their prime in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. And
Wow.
as I said at Toastmasters yesterday, it triggered me.
I
And
bet it did.
I did the smart thing of waiting not 24, not 48, but 72 hours before I responded.
I would have to take a very long breath when somebody knows me so little.
Yes, exactly. And so anyway, that was just kind of a little side note, a little funny. But the
So
whole
wait a minute. I just want to point out, by making a broad brushstroke statement like that, he made you feel invisible.
he did. He
Yeah,
made
we have
me
to be
feel
careful about
invisible,
those
and
statements.
he also made me feel like, just go ahead and kill me now because, I'm past my prime and can't contribute, right? And I'm
Yeah,
like, dude, you don't
bunch
even
of
know.
garbage.
Yeah,
As if we're not valuable at every stage of life and we're not needed.
you're right. He did make
He's
me feel.
also he's also pointing to the youth orientation of American culture in other cultures, and I'm not idealizing any culture in the world. I'm just suggesting that so often in the Far East, in Japan and China, elders are the ones that are held up as the ideal because they actually now have something to give back from a place of depth and wisdom and experience and screw ups. Right?
Voila. Services. That's how it was born. Literally all the wisdom of experiences of my life.
Hello, hello.
So let's talk about, just spend some time talking about the mindset and the shifts that you made or didn't make, or the realizations, all the things about mindset and business.
Okay. Specifically, that's a big that's a big
That's a
topic.
very broad.
Where
So
we where do we want to take that, Derlene? Where do you want to
let
go? This
let's
is so
start
fun.
with the mindset from being an educator to an entrepreneur. Um, what was that like for you to that you had this schedule every single day and you knew what you were going to teach, and all of a sudden, and you also knew who your students were, right? And
Oh
now
my
we're
God.
out shifting into this world called networking and all the things.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That was big and scary for me. Derlene, you have the gift of being quite extroverted, and I'm quite introverted. So networking is scary and hard. I We have to be careful not to equate introversion with shyness. I am not shy. I'm not shy. I just need time alone. I need the time to think things through before I speak. Uh, I would call myself a gregarious introvert. So,
I think that's an excellent description.
yeah. And it works well for me. At least it does. Um, to switch from being kind of classroom teacher, from kids in classrooms to grown-ups in boardrooms, that's the teaching doesn't change. Meeting people where they are doesn't change. But having to reach out has been probably the steepest learning curve, to go find people. There isn't a group of people, there isn't an industry, there isn't an organization that doesn't need cultural intelligence, particularly now as demographics are shifting so dramatically in the United States, and there are more babies of color than white babies being born today. People are going to have to learn cultural intelligence. And silly, naive me thought, oh, everybody's going to want this. But then as I read the recent And there's a little bit of research out there that supports that CEOs are very interested in diversifying their organizations. But the thing is, they don't know how to do it. So it goes on the back burner. And it took me a couple of years to figure out, oh, I'm going to have to find the CEOs that need to diversify yesterday, that have a burning platform. And one of the things that I figured out is that there are a couple of industries that really need to diversify because they can't find people. And that's healthcare, that's construction. And another industry is credit unions, which is really interesting because credit unions are tasked with serving their communities and offering financial services and distinct and unique ways to perhaps lift people out of poverty. And poverty isn't determined by race, right? So learning how to talk with people who are different is going to be important in a credit union because people who work there may have more financial wherewithal than the people that they're serving. So that's going to take cultural intelligence. It's those three industries that I learned that I need to target. And one of the things that I've discovered is I'm much more comfortable doing presentations than networking. I'm not like you, Derlene, and I really would kick myself for just not being a networker. My husband is a lot more like you. Y'all haven't met a stranger. You know, my husband has
a potential friend.
He's like pumping gas at the gas station, and in that time he's got a new friend, and I'm just like, what? Who are you? Right? I don't get that. So one of the things, instead of resisting who I am and what I'm about, I realized because of another friend of mine, she pointed out, Amy, if you just get in front of people, they're going to see that you're going to invite them in rather than call them out. That's your sweet spot. And it was like, oh, she met me where I was. She pointed out, and she has a marketing background. She pointed out for me that I need to be speaking at conferences. And it's at conferences, people do a workshop with me, and I do because I'm a teacher, I do an interactive workshop, right? Yep. And we're working toward transformation. They're talking with their friends. They're getting some tools for talking with people who are different, never have been called out, never have been blamed for being white or part of the dominant culture or made to feel less than because they're part of an underrepresented group. None of that goes on. And there's no role playing, for goodness sake. Ew, who wants to do that? But there's this opportunity to think and reflect and grow. You've been invited into the work, and nobody should have to do this work if they don't want.
So I have my mind thinking. I think that I met somebody that I want you to be introduced to. So just remind me later. So
thank you.
What I just realized that you and I are both in the same business in terms of really our ultimate goal is to shift the mindsets. In terms of our audience, our students, so to speak, people that show up. And if my goal, and one person, right? One person there shifts their mindset and starts that conversation and goes home and says, I went to the most interesting thing today. This conference was all about what was a new term for me, cultural intelligence, and just imagine when that person then gets together with their sphere and says, oh my gosh, you guys, I mean, this is the way I see the world transforming, right? This is the only way I see it transforming, is literally
one soul at a time.
And it's got to be us in the trenches. It cannot be any kind of political thing. It's got to be us in the trenches doing the hard work and shifting our mindset when we see that need.
Right. We have to model it in order to teach it. Otherwise, kind of come across as hypocritical.
Yes, 100%. And I think one of the things that I've always loved about you is that your ego is the ego that is designed to serve others, and it doesn't show up in terms of like the ego leading with I'm so smart. I mean, you're a doctorate of education and you have all these certifications in cultural intelligence. And when you show up, it's like with this little, here I am, I'm here to love you through this and give you some great information and all the things.
Thank you.
And that is, I think that is because I believe that's the way I show up. I believe that's why this conversation happened today is
Yes,
because that's
ma'am.
who both of us are. And maybe we call that wisdom. Maybe we call that experience. Maybe we call that education, maybe a little bit of everything.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's precious.
Mhm. So
Thank you.
curiously, what you shifting your business from I call it a job to a business, an entrepreneur, and then like the effects in your family, what has that been like how are you have these
Oh, fun.
dynamic children, and just how does that show up for you in your personal life like that?
Oh, for me, it's all integrated. Learning how to love is learning how to love, and helping, coming alongside my kids. And they're all grown-ups now. They go from 20 to 30. And so we get to have in-depth conversations on a regular basis. And cultural intelligence always applies. I'm thinking about my youngest, who's in engineering school. She goes to Mizzou, the University of Missouri in Columbia, and she's studying civil engineering. And she's got professors from around the world. And there's a couple that are driving her ballistic. And she went on and on for 5 or 10 minutes, maybe the other day, about this Indian professor from Asia, India, and complaining, couldn't understand him. And no matter how much affirming I did, Derlene, she wasn't moving off and starting to problem solve. So I finally said, can I cut you off for just a moment and offer a suggestion? And she said, okay. I have permission. I had her permission. And I said, sweetheart, it sounds like this professor's a real pain in your butt. And she goes, yeah. And I said, go get him. Go develop a relationship with him. Start doing the office hours. She goes, I'm doing the office hours. And I said, with what kind of heart? With what kind of mind? Are you interested in getting to know him? Because he's teaching about his expertise, his love, his child, his baby. Go get him. Go develop a relationship with him. Fine. She knew she needed to. She knew she needed to.
Yeah.
And she got on the phone last night and she was complaining. And then she started telling me about how she's kind of wearing him down. He talks down to her as if she doesn't know anything, but he's softening in office hours, and because she won't go away. And I'm like, there's your cultural intelligence. Relationships, particularly when you have white skin in the United States, relationships have to be pursued. Relationships are either growing, that we're either creating them or destroying them. There's no status quo.
Yeah.
So go get them. That's an example. My other daughter is a journalist with Business Insider, and she has to, because she has white skin, and she wants to get kind of the full story, which means she's going to have to get it from different perspectives. She and I unpack on a regular basis how she's got to go after those minority-owned business owners, and how she's not inherently trustworthy because of her white skin, and she's a journalist. Both of those are against her. But she keeps on pursuing them with permission and showing genuine interest and wanting to promote and lift up that business on Business Insider, because it's quite a platform. My daughter Abby is one of those journalists who is depressed if she only gets 1 million views. So it's awesome to have your business lifted up by Abby Narishkin, right?
Right, exactly.
But she's got to go after it. She has to pursue those relationships. So it's totally integrated. You're so dear to ask. Nobody asked me about my kids. Thank you.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. Well, they're who's going to carry on our legacy, and we want to know we did it right.
Amen.
Right?
Amen. Amen. It happened. Tally works in the museum industry. And so she goes at it looking at exhibits from different perspectives, because the more voices that are represented in a museum exhibit, the more people are attracted to that exhibit, and it makes more money. Right. And then my son is an engineer with Boeing, and ended up in Japan for 2 weeks representing fuel systems. I don't know what he does, but we had a long conversation about how to respect a top-down oriented culture that's more formal in the United States. And he bought himself 2 suits.
Perfect. He listens to mama.
You know, I went with him shopping, right?
Of course. Well, Amy, this has just been just a highlight of my week, month.
Likewise,
And,
likewise.
I so appreciate you taking the time and sharing all of this with my audience. And as you know, as we've spoken several times, it is my goal to be a part of the transformation of the world, and completely recognizing that I'm just a little grain of sand, and knowing that more granules that I bring with me,
So dear.
we get to make that beach together so that we can really transform. So thank you for your time, for your love of humanity. And that makes me want to cry again, because I believe so passionately that's who you are. So just thank you so much. And
thank you.
Thank
you for linking arms with me and embracing, with all our humanity, with all our messiness and all our beauty in there together, doing and taking little steps toward more and more love. I appreciate you, Derlene. Thank you.
I appreciate you too. Any parting words to our friends that are listening?
Oh, thank you for that offer. If I write a monthly blog that has it's stair steps for expressing cultural intelligence at work, and I'd love to share that with you. And if you want to read that blog or buy my book, you can find me on my website at www.empoweringpartners.com.
Okay, good. And we'll put that in the notes as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, Amy,
in the meantime, if just like I'm linked with you, Derlene, on LinkedIn, it's fun to connect with there. And I post a couple of times a week how to use this stuff at work. So link up with me and join me. Yeah, join me and Derlene.
I was going to say, I think of all the blogs, it's yours that I try to catch most often, because it always elicits conversation between us, and I enjoy that so much.
That's so cool. Thank you, Derlene. Thank you for this time with you.
Thank you. Bye, friends. We will see you next time. And I know that you are joining me in your appreciation and gratitude to Amy for all the changes that she is making in our world, being, like I said earlier, down in the trenches and making the difference that makes the difference. So thank you, Amy. And friends, see you next time.